Hello viewers, thank you once again for joining Alpha One Canada's 2015 Virtual Education Summit. My name is Duncan Lam and I'm your host. I'd like to introduce to you today Jane Duke from the Asthma and Airway Center at Toronto Western Hospital. Jane will be speaking to us on the topic of clinical trials, should I get involved? Jane, do you mind saying a few words to our viewers before we begin? Maybe share with us your experience and areas of expertise.
Thank you, Duncan, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to take part in this summit. I'm a registered nurse with over 20 years experience. I've worked in the area of clinical trials now for 18 years. 12 of those years have been in respiratory medicine and in trials dealing with COPD, asthma, and alpha-1.
Thank you very much, Jane. Well, I'm sure our viewers are anxious to know more about the subject of clinical trials, so let's proceed to today's featured presentation.
Clinical trials, should I get involved? Before you can consider participating in a trial, it's important for you to have a better understanding of clinical trials. Hopefully I can shed some light on this area. I'm going to start off by giving you just a brief history on clinical trials, the development of legislation for the protection of participants, the different phases of a clinical trial, what to look for in a clinical trial, and finally give you some reasons to consider when thinking about participating in a trial. So for some, clinical trials have conjured up images of mad scientists doing wild experiments on unsuspecting individuals. I hope that after my presentation you'll have a better understanding of the importance of clinical trials and that I can alleviate any possible misgivings that you may have had on this area. Clinical trials have a long and rich history. The first clinical trial documented in the Old Testament dates back to 605 BC. Since this first trial, the industry has progressed immensely, refining the process of clinical trials and furthering the methods of protection for the patients involved. So clinical trials have come a long way, and changes have occurred generally as a result of certain events in history. Because of these events, legislation has been created and is in place to ensure patient protection. As mentioned, I've been working in clinical trials for over 20 years, and I actually fell into this quite by accident. And at the time of entering into this role as a clinical trial coordinator, there really was no rule book or no how-to book, and most of my experience and training came on the job. Since then, there's been huge changes and increased emphasis on training programs for clinical trial staff, educational sessions, and actually much more emphasis is placed on accountability in clinical trials. So one very important set of principles created was that of the Nuremberg Code, and this was created as a result of trials that involved doctors conducting human experiments in concentration camps during World War II. These principles are what we use today when developing and conducting trials. So as researchers, we're accountable not only to the participant, but also to regulatory bodies such as the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, as well as in Canada, Health Canada. I'd just like to summarize the 10 basic statements, and if you'd like to learn more about the Nuremberg Code, I have a link that you can find out some more. First and foremost, voluntary consent is absolutely essential. There should be an absence of any coercion. You should not feel any pressure to take part in a study. The study should be worthwhile. It should benefit others. The study should be designed and based on previous studies. The study will avoid all unnecessary harm. The study should not be conducted if there is a reasonable doubt that it could cause death or serious harm. And the degree of risk should not be greater than the importance of the study. There should be proper preparations and adequate facilities should be ensured. The experiment should be conducted only by scientifically qualified persons. At any time, the participant can withdraw from the study. At any time, the investigator can terminate the study. So this is very important principles that we use and that are included in what we call a consent form. And it's something that I'm going to discuss a little bit further in terms of participation and the term informed consent. So on average, it takes about 12 years for a drug to get to the market. And in those 12 years, there are 4 phases to the trial. Phase 1, they test new drugs on healthy volunteers to determine safety, dosing, efficacy or effectiveness, and tolerability of certain medications or treatments. So phase 1 is the first time that a medication is being treated on humans. Prior to that, all testing has usually been done on animals. Some of you may be familiar with either radio ads or print TV ads mentioning ads looking for healthy volunteers, usually males between the ages of 20 and 50. These would be a phase 1 trial. A phase 2 trial, it tests drugs on individuals that have the disease under study. Generally, it's a larger group of individuals than in the phase 1. And they too test for the efficacy, the toxicity, and safety of the medication. Phase 3 studies involve large groups of participants, and it's generally tested across a number of different trial centers to confirm the treatment's efficacy and to identify any side effects, whether positive or negative. Phase 4 trials are conducted after the drug has been marketed to determine further any benefits or risks. Sometimes a phase 4 trial can be referred to as a post-marketing phase. So sometimes even after a medication is out and available in your pharmacy, it can still go through further testing. I previously mentioned the principles and legislations that protect participants. And one of the very important or key elements of a trial is the informed consent. And the informed consent is actually a written document. It's outlining your commitment to participate in a clinical trial. So once you've been fully informed and educated about the nature of the clinical trial, you will sign this agreement confirming your consent. So in order to take part in a clinical trial, each participant must provide this written consent, indicating that they understand and agree to any potential risks of the trial. So you should only sign the agreement if you've had ample time to consider the risks, benefits, and whether you wish to participate. So it's more than just signing a piece of paper. It's an ongoing process if you think about it. It should be assessed throughout the trial that you want to continue with the trial, that you don't have any further questions or you need clarification. If you do, it should be discussed. One of the process that I use is when I have a potential candidate for a trial that has expressed interest in it, after giving them a verbal description of the trial, about the medication under study, medication or device under study, I would then give them a brief description of the time commitment, how many study visit schedule, certain procedures that need to be done during the clinical trial. And then once I've given them a verbal description of it, then I usually give them a copy of the consent form for them to actually just take home and spend some time going through it. I ask them to jot down questions on it. I ask them to pull it apart. They can have a chance to discuss it with family, friends, other healthcare providers. And by doing this, I feel that they fully are informed about everything about the trial and what is expected of them and what goes on during the trial. And then once I find that this has been read over and we've discussed it and they would like to proceed, and it's only then that we would get a written informed, they would sign the actual document. Like I said, it's an ongoing process. It's always evaluated throughout the trial, And by signing this document and consenting to participate in the trial, it's not it gives you an opportunity, as well as if circumstances change and you don't want to continue in the trial for whatever reason, you are able to opt out of it. So let's say you're now considering about participating in a trial. You're trying to make a decision. Here are some important facts that I think you should consider when looking at a potential trial. First of all, a clinical study is conducted according to a protocol. So this protocol is what the investigating staff follow when they conduct the trial. The protocol is designed to answer specific research questions and to safeguard the health of the participant. It contains the following information: the reason for conducting the study, the clinical phase of the trial, who may participate in the study, so there's certain criteria that you need to meet in order to be included in the study, the number of participants that are needed, and the schedule of tests, procedures, or drugs and their dosages, as well as the use of placebos. So placebo is a substance that has no therapeutic effect. It's usually used in comparing to testing a new drug. So what I think you should expect from a good trial center is that you have a knowledgeable staff. They're both knowledgeable in the area that's under study, as well as the consent form. They're able to answer all your questions in regards to the consent form. They can tell you the amount of visits that are required for the study, how long the visits should take while you're at the site, as well as there should be some form of reimbursement for reasonable expenses in taking part in the study. What you should avoid in regards to sites is that you should never feel any pressure to sign a consent without having all your questions answered. And you also make sure that the staff that's conducting the study is specialized in that particular area and know the area of clinical trials. Other things to consider is the type of trial that you're participating in. Is it a randomized, controlled, blinded? These are key terms that you may see on a consent form or when you're talking about an actual protocol. The term randomized means that you're being assigned. Generally, it's a random selection to a particular group. It could be the study drug versus the placebo. Generally, this randomization procedure is done by a computer. It's not done by a human flip of a coin. It's usually done by a computer, and so it doesn't take into consideration any key elements about you as an individual. It's just, this is the number and this is what's going to be assigned to it. Blinded term refers to the term that usually both yourself and the investigator staff are unaware of which treatment you're in. So you may be receiving the drug or you may be on the placebo, and both the staff and yourself are not aware of which group you're in. And this is to prevent any type of bias, either by yourself or by the study staff. It's also important just to note that it's easy enough to unblind a particular participant in a case of an emergency. We have the ability to do this. And what information will be gathered about the participants? And this last bit is of importance, as it refers to your privacy and your confidentiality that you're guaranteed while participating in the trial. So you're assured of confidentiality. Here in Canada, we have strict privacy laws. The Personal Information Protection and Electronic Document Act, PIPEDA, and this ensures that as a health consumer and as a study participant, that we are assured of confidentiality while our health information is being personal and health information is being collected. Generally, once you enter into a study, you're assigned a study number, and all your information is collected under that study number, as opposed to your name. As I mentioned, most of these trials are quite large, and in terms of the information that's being collected and being studied, your information generally is being collected as a whole, and as opposed to very individual. So why participate in a clinical trial? Well, here are a few reasons that I think you may want to consider. First of all, you assist in gathering information about new treatments that can potentially help your condition and that of others. And this could be of particular interest to patients with alpha-1, as this is a genetic disorder. And you may be looking at what can I look at for the future, both for myself and future generations. You may benefit from the treatment under study. You may gain access to new treatments that are not yet available. You'll receive medical care from doctors who specialize in treating that condition, and you can play a more active role in your own health care. As I mentioned previously, I've worked in respiratory medicine now for 12 years. We conduct studies in the area of asthma, COPD, and allergies. Early on, we saw very few studies available to alpha-1 patients, and in most cases, alpha-1 patients were excluded from studies because of their diagnosis of alpha-1. And recently, we've seen this change. It's a positive change, and we're seeing more opportunity for alpha-1 patients to participate in very exciting trials. And some of the trials that we've had an opportunity to run are, one is the REPAIR trial. It was sponsored by Roche, and it was conducted back in 2006. And this was a trial that was looking at a retinoid therapy. It was a once daily oral medication that was taken in the treatment of alpha-1. Another trial that we just recently finished, and it's now just the research is accumulating and being published on this, is the rabbit trial. And this was sponsored by CSL Behring, and it was looking at the medication Zemara. And Zemara is a weekly augmentation, it's a weekly infusion augmentation therapy. And this trial was offered, and we started in 2008, and it was a 2-year blinded trial. So people were either randomized to the study drug or a placebo. And at the end of the 2 years, these participants then were given an opportunity to continue on in what was called an open label portion of the trial. And this meant that they were actually, everybody was given the actual medication Zemara, weekly infusions for an additional 2 years. So that was quite exciting. Another trial that we participated in was the Kamada trial. And this was an inhaled alpha-1 augmentation therapy. And this ran from 2011 to 2014. And it was a nebulized treatment that was taken once a day. And currently we are running the Sparta trial. And the sponsor of this trial is Grifols. And the medication they're looking at is prolastin, and they're looking at different doses of prolastin. So they're looking at the current dose that's approved here in Canada. They're looking at a double dose, and they're comparing it to a placebo arm. This trial is 3 years in length, with numerous visits to our site, and it involves weekly infusions of prolastin. And again, this trial, at the end of the 3 years, the sponsor, Grifols, has now offered an open label portion of this, where the participants completing the blinded portion of the trial will then have an opportunity to receive the medication for an additional 2 years. I've left my contact information up here, and I would welcome anybody to contact me if you want more information on clinical trials, or if you want to know about current trials that we're doing at the time. I would like to thank Alpha-1 Canada for inviting me to participate in this virtual patient education summit. Thank you.
This concludes today's featured presentation. On behalf of Alpha-1 Canada, I would like to thank Jane Duke for taking the time to prepare and speak to our viewers. The decision whether to get involved in clinical trials certainly can sometimes be a very difficult one to make. But I'm glad that Jane has given us some clear definition and clarification on the process to help our viewers make a better informed decision. Please on our website, www.alpha1canada.ca. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.